Welcome to today's webinar brought to you by MACF and Florida Makes. I am your host, Sherry Reeves, along with Christian Davison. We are ready to start our program. Today is May 7th, 2020, and we will start at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Today's topic, coming out of the COVID-19 crisis, preparing your business for the new norm. I'd like to introduce today's panelists, starting with Doug Foreman. He is the CEO of Fringe Benefit Plans and a member of the MACF Board of Directors. Doug, would you like to wave? Fringe Benefit Plans has been providing companies with HR and benefits administration for the past 50 years and is based in Winter Park, Florida. Their goal is to help companies with recruiting, retention, and rewarding good employees. Our next panelist is Brittany Hooper. Brittany, you want to wave to everybody? Regional Vice President of Sales at LSQ. Brittany helps businesses identify ways to optimize their cash conversion cycle through accounts receivable and supply chain financing. She helps finance clients who are in the growth mode, turnaround mode, and when traditional bank financing no longer works for a company. In this economic environment, her focus is helping identify credit risk within the supply chain, allows manufacturing companies to make strategic supplier decisions. And to round out our panel this morning is Joe Raymond, founder and managing partner of RVR Consulting Group. Joe, will you give us a wave? There you go. Hello, Joe. In 1999, Joe founded RVR, a full-service growth management firm that has grown to 35-plus consultants and that are able to identify and address any issues a business is facing. RVR's consultants work to optimize the success of manufacturing companies by accelerating their scalability, implementing systems, and providing advisory services. RVR has design solutions to tackle the problems typically facing our manufacturers today, including supply, capacity, and lack of operational and financial support. A few housekeeping notes. As a participant, your audio will be in listen-only mode using your phone or computer, whichever is more convenient. Additionally, you will have the opportunity to ask your questions using the question window. This is a live webinar event which will be recorded. A link to the recording will be provided to you within a few days. Now, I'd like to turn the presentation over to our panelists.
Thank you very much, Sherry, and thank you, Christian, for helping us put this webinar together for everyone. And also thank you for everything that you do supporting manufacturing in conjunction with Florida Makes. You guys have been a tremendous resource. And I know that the audience and the manufacturers also appreciate that. For my focus on this discussion today, I'm going to be coming from the lens of the human resources or human capital aspect of your business. I'll be able to answer any questions you might have regarding the CARES Act or as it regards to employee benefits and your human capital, as well as the Family First Care Response, Corona Response Act. I know those have been out for a couple of weeks, but we are still getting questions on those. And as we get back to work, these two laws that are in place now can affect your business, and you really need to be intentional and understanding of those laws as they might affect your workforce. So for today, Christian, if you wouldn't mind flipping to the next slide for me. So today I want to talk about getting back to work, or re-entry is a term that you might have heard or start to hear. And I think that this comic helps kind of give you a visual for those. I know in a lot of manufacturing, it's been pretty close to business as usual on the manufacturing side, but administratively, there are a lot of folks who have been working from home, and they'll slowly be coming back into the office, hopefully. And so this gives an illustration of what that funny side of that. I've heard some people say that after seeing the slide that, well, maybe they'll bring in some dirty laundry and some cat litter, and they'll put that in the office, so people have those those smells that they've been used to at home to help them slowly get integrated back into the office and the workflow. We joke about that, but truly, this is something that could there could be some culture shock as people have been working from home for the past 6 to 8 weeks, and then getting back into a normal workflow. And employers need to be conscious and aware of that. If you could please flip to the next slide. So reentry, a term that we're hearing, if you think about, and I put an illustration here of a capsule reentering the atmosphere, and some of you may have seen that movie. It's an older movie called Apollo 13, and in that movie they're talking about the reentry of the astronauts coming back into the atmosphere, and if they came in too quick, then things get really hot and could endanger those that are reentering. That's one concern. If you come in too shallow, there was actually the ability where that capsule that could veer off and not have a safe reentry in that case. So the illustration there is that we should all be employers. Each of your businesses are different, and you have different points of entry that are going to make the most sense for you, and you really need to be very intentional about that as you bring back your workforce. If you said, all right, everybody, let's start work on Monday, that may not work as well. And communication is very important with your employees. You're going to have folks who are not able to come back to work right away due to small children at home, some that may feel that they have a pre-existing condition that would cause them to be at a greater risk to the COVID. And those are items that you really need to take into consideration and be aware of. So we recommend a soft touch with heavy communication, and be very intentional in your process. As you are rehiring, you might have employees who say no, we don't want to come back to work, and so you have to look at that. Does it make sense to take the time with that employee who has hopefully properly been trained for their position, or does it make sense to just hire a new person where you might have a training process, a number of weeks for them to get up to speed? So, weigh the options between which is going to make the most sense for you. And as I mentioned earlier, with the First Family Act, there's the FMLA rules that now are applied to companies with less than 50 employees. So you may have to really pay attention to those extended FMLA laws, the Family Medical Leave Act rules that apply under that Family First Act. So just make sure you're up to speed on how that can affect you and your employees. One of the programs that often is forgot about, because our focus at Fringe Benefit Plans is that human resources and the benefit aspect of it, is where we continue to remind our clients that most of you probably have an employee assistance program, an EAP program. It's often forgotten about, but you may already have that in place, and that would be a good program to remind your employees about, where they can reach out if they are having stressful situation, financial issues. They can reach out to that EAP program at no charge at all for them. So there are certain benefits. This is just a reminder to in the education process, remind your employees of the resources that you have as their employer available to them to help them get back to work in a safe manner. And so if you do have any questions throughout this presentation, please feel free to add them to the chat as mentioned earlier, and we'll be able to respond to those later. And with that, I'd like to hand it over to Brittany from LSQ for the next portion.
Thank you, Doug. And again, echoing your original comments about thank you to Florida Makes and MACS and Sherry for Christian. Truly appreciate everything that you guys do for the manufacturing community and our local or state manufacturers, and how you guys help really be tremendous value to them. So love to chat really what we're seeing with LSQ, the overall credit environment and the cash conversion cycle, and what you should be thinking about as you either re-enter or re-evaluate your business platform going forward. Quick step back, for LSQ, we were founded in 1996, the largest privately held factor in the U.S. So we offer factoring facilities up to $50 million, and then we work with supply chain finance. Our supply chain finance companies offers platforms anywhere from $50 million to $500 million. So really helping drive some alternative financing that helps with the overall cash conversion cycle. So a quick thought on really what is going on in the overall credit environment today. While COVID is one of the main drivers that we're seeing, what really hasn't been solved is the debt that's proliferated into governments and businesses that are over-leveraged. We don't necessarily have a view on whether it's a U-shaped or a V-shaped or an L-shaped recovery, but the view overall is that the credit on the balance sheets will have to get cleaned up. And whether it's your company or companies that you work with, that's something that's really important to pay attention to. It really hasn't been solved through this pandemic. A lot of the PPP, the SBA, the different programs right now are really covering up some of those leverage debt issues. But I think as the tide goes out, we're going to start seeing who's swimming naked. And you're going to see where companies are over leveraged, not paying bills on time. And eventually, I think we're going to start seeing more bankruptcies, but very few at this point. And so I think what will end up happening is a lot of debt will end up being renegotiated or canceled by the different banks and PE firms. They're going to really start backing out on that probably in the next 30, 60, 90 days. And so it's really important to know what's going on with your suppliers and your clients as well in that space. In terms of industries that are being affected, obviously oil and gas, but that was due to other issues with Iran and Russia that has just been exacerbated by the pandemic, of course. And they typically go through this every 8 to 12 years, so it's not something that's different there. But then we have a lot of industries in the travel tourism that haven't really ever been stress tested. 2 years ago, we would have never guessed Delta, Starwood, Marriott, that they'd be in a cash crunch. So I think we'll end up seeing a fair amount of mergers come out of this. And so that'll be interesting as you evaluate who's your end user and how does that affect your supply chain. And then obviously anything high-end fashion is definitely going to be hit the hardest. You see Lord & Taylor, who's not even filing bankruptcy, they're just going to straight liquidation. So you're starting to see certain industries that are affected more than others. And I can touch more on that as well. As you really start to evaluate your overall supply chain finance, your overall supply chain for production, understanding the political environment is also really vital as well. There's some big pushes that we're starting to see for different bills that are implemented. And just this week, one of the congressmen from Tennessee has introduced a bill that is designed to bring manufacturing to the U.S. and exit it from China. So what it allows is for manufacturing companies to deduct the entire cost of capital spending associated with relocating from China. So paying attention to that, what impact is that going to play on your business? Also, what's the impact of the tariffs, the trade restrictions, sanctions? And there's been talks in the White House of the U.S. canceling debt obligations to the Chinese regime. So how is that going to disrupt your overall supply chain? So understanding that even though the manufacturing industry has been relatively strong on this, it still is important to know where are the hiccups that can occur in your business and take that time to evaluate it. Other things like the supply who's supplying the raw materials. Many of the larger companies that you're going to start seeing, they are extending their account payment terms to be able to generate cash without necessarily generating debt. And that's important because right now, while they might have low stock, they would rather be able to do that versus issuing more stock at a lower value and not necessarily what their true market value is. So as you see that, that's going to maybe affect your vendors, your suppliers, because it's going to create a longer term in the product for the cash conversion where they're not able to transfer cash to you, or vice versa. They're going to end up extending terms for you. So how does that necessarily impact your overall for the supply chain, whether it's who you're selling to or if it's affecting who you're buying from for a product? And so really, when you think about it, when larger companies start extending their payment terms to be able to generate cash, they might have a supply chain finance program, and that allows early payment with a deduction on it. And so some people may or may not be able to qualify for that. Typically, what you're going to see is about 10% of the vendors will qualify, which means that still could, even if they do implement a supply chain finance program in the traditional market for that, since only 10% are taking advantage of that, that still could have a large effect on your business. And then lastly, they might just extend terms without any sort of option for that program. So understanding what's going on with your suppliers and your clients is going to be really important. And then lastly, from a cash conversion cycle, this is probably one of the most important things that you need to pay attention to. When you think about it, cash is the oxygen of the SMEs, small, middle enterprises. Cash conversion cycle really measures the time and days that it takes for a company to convert inputs into cash flow. So in other words, the cash conversion cycle reflects the length of time it takes a company to sell inventory, collect receivables, and pay its bills. It's usually mismanaged because either a lack of awareness or attention, or maybe just not the expertise to analyze that. So now is really the time to start paying attention to this, because it's really not just about your financials and your EBITDA. It's really important to know, because your financials aren't going to reflect your changes in your working capital. So it's good to do an evaluation of that. And then when you think about the cash conversion cycle too, while it varies by industry, it also varies within industry from a sector standpoint. Mentioned earlier, consumer discretionary goods, healthcare, and some other materials have the longest cash conversion cycle, while communication services, utilities, consumer staples typically have a lower cycle. So you should really know what's your typical cash conversion cycle for your industry, and taking the time to evaluate that for your industry and your sector, and really evaluate the overall logistics now. It will be able to allow you to keep more cash on hand, and when the economy recovers and more manufacturing is brought back into the U.S., you're able to really not just survive through this, but thrive through it. So those are some initial thoughts on it. Happy to answer more questions on whether it's the political standpoint, the future of manufacturing, or how do you have some different conversations and start looking to analyze that. So with that being said, I will hand over the reins to Joe Raymond with RVR. Thank you.
Thanks, Brittany. Hello, everyone, and I hope everyone is well in this very trying time, and everyone is staying safe. For my piece, I'm coming strictly from a owner-operator C-suite perspective of how do I run the business aspect. What you heard from Doug and Brittany is things related to the business, but also a lot of the stuff relative to what the government's doing, what the credit market's doing, what are things that you obviously need to know to make good business decisions. I come from a background, I've owned, operated, grew very large businesses and successfully exited. My primary clients in the space were manufacturing and logistics companies. So I've worked very closely throughout the country with these companies, so very versed on some of the things and what you're going through currently. And I will tell you that the most important thing for any business owner, any operator going through this is, you know, we can't stick our head in the sand and say, oh, I'll just wait till this thing blows over. You know, this is where leaders are found and leaders are made are by listening and participating.
So, all right, there they are. All right, thanks. Thanks so much. Okay, you too. Bye.
Okay, we got a little crossover there. So, and just continuing it, you know, the focus on the business and leading your group of people is crucial to the success. So first, trying to explain what you've been through, and Christian, you could switch to the next slide, please. So when you look at this, and yes, we haven't had a pandemic like this. We haven't had where we've been quarantined and stay-home orders. I mean, we had, you know, 9/11 and where things stopped, but not to this level. You know, this has the effect of 9/11 and the recession we went through in 2008, all impacted at the same time. One of the things you got to understand, though, is that, you know, this downturn in our economy, which feels like a recession with 30 million plus people unemployed, was something that was created from a safety perspective. So understanding that, you also understand that we were in a very good economy. So when you look at something like this and when it happens, you have to recognize that there's really three phases to this. And we all went through phase one where we go, okay, what do I do now with my business to handle this type of crisis? You know, you do the knee-jerk reactions. I got to let people go. I got to, you know, cut my expenses significantly. I got to put my cash under my bed. What are these things that I need to do to immediately position? Or, you know, a lot of us went out and got the CARE Act money and the opportunity through PPP or others and took advantage of that, which was exactly serve the purpose that we need. So once you get through that, you say, oh my God, I still have a business. I survived through that first piece and I got to continue to operate. How do I effectively navigate through this? And then where we currently are here in Florida with lifting of some of the restrictions is, okay, what's my plan for coming out of this? And I would advise all of you to look at it in terms of what's the next 6 months look like? That's where I need to focus on. That gets you to the end of October, and for those that are on calendar year, gives you a couple months to plan 2021. Plus, we'll have a very good perspective on where we are. So things that you really need to look at. You know, how did my product or service do through this downturn? What did I realize? The self-evaluation of your company. What did I realize? Things that, is my product and service still relevant? Okay. Do I need to change it? Is my target market still relevant? And the way you find those things out is you got to get out there in front of your clients. You got to get out there through your prospects. You've got to figure out what are they doing? What are they feeling? You know, probably one of the most important things is staying relevant to your clients through this. You have to look at every aspect of your business, you know, and like I said, start with those clients, prospects, even your vendors, and look at your financial and operational reporting. You know, where you look at it on a monthly basis, you now should be looking at things weekly. You know, let's see what trends are. How are we shaking out from last year? How are we shaking out currently? This also gives you a time to optimize, you know, the structure, the talent, and the skill sets within your organization. It's something you were like, ah, God, things are going good. I don't need to adjust. I don't need to do now. Now's the time you look at every aspect of your business. And, you know, even your systems, you know, you might have some systems that haven't been doing well for you. They're not driving efficiencies. So it's really important that you look at the assessment of your business and you find out, what were the strengths of us during this time? What did we learn that we do really well? And then what are those things that we learned that we're not very well at? And then you need to take and put a plan in action of how you anticipate coming out of here. And a good part of that is going to be people also. Who do I bring back? When do I bring these people back? What does that look like? But I will tell you, one of the most important things is communication. And one of the things that I instilled in all our clients right away is you got to communicate. You got to communicate to your clients on a weekly basis. You got to communicate to people in the prospect pipeline. You got to communicate to your vendors. You need to communicate to your team and your company. This is a tough time for people. And if you had to lay off people or furlough people and they weren't getting money and they're not receiving checks, we can't turn them off. We got to respond and understand, that some of them aren't able to achieve even the basic needs that they have. So, from my perspective, coming from an owner, got to take care of our people. I got to make sure that my company can survive through this and how long they can survive. I got to make sure that I have a good plan for coming out of it and that everybody in my company understands. And probably most important out of everything is make sure we're safe, because the safety of your employees means the safety of their families, means the safety of your clients, and it's really, really important that you address all those things. So that's kind of just a quick overview of some of the things you need to be thinking about, but you are definitely entering this phase 3 in my mind, and that is coming out of COVID-19. What should my plan be and what do I need to do? So thank you.
Okay, at this time we're going to open it up for questions. We do have some questions here already, and I'm going to start it off for something a little more broad. What is the future of manufacturing in the U.S.? And Brittany, perhaps you can touch on this from a financial strategy side.
Yeah, from a financial strategy side, I think the future of manufacturing in the U.S. actually looks really good. So that's a huge thing. With a lot of the push from the White House and from Congress to bring a lot of manufacturing back to the U.S. I know the White House economic advisor, he really strongly advocates for the supply chain to cut dependence on China. Whether it's taking some of our supply chain from China and working with other countries for that, or even just bringing it back to the U.S. So I think that that's really important as we go into the future of that, because I think as asset prices are falling right now, you're going to see what we're already seeing is that China is also acquiring U.S. companies or some of the different infrastructure of U.S. companies, and they're on a global buying spree, which definitely has implications to our national security. So I think understanding some of that and the bills that are being pushed toward stopping that is definitely important to watch from the overall impact and the longer term impact of what manufacturing looks like in the U.S. And obviously, again, the possibility of canceling U.S. debt obligations to the Chinese government is important to watch. And whether it's any trade restrictions or tariffs from a supply chain finance or supply chain of that as well. So I think those are key important things to watch. A lot of the larger, more raw materials, U.S. steel type of companies, if you look at their first quarter report, a lot of them are doing different things to do some critical infrastructure. So that's going to be important to know what are some of the different critical infrastructures of where that is coming from for the production of your business. But overall, manufacturing will still go strong. It's just critical to know which pieces of the manufacturing industry and which sectors are going to be hit, and how do you say, hey, my manufacturing company, if that is one that is going to maybe take a hit for the next year, 2 year period, then you want to maybe start looking at how do I reorient what you're producing and maybe produce something that's more on the consumer staple goods type of environment, or certain construction industries, whatever it is that you might be in.
Brittany, as you mentioned different industries, are there on a supply chain side, are there industries that you're seeing a slowdown as far as collections of payments? Is there any trends you're seeing?
Yeah, so LSQ, we manage a portfolio of about $265 billion. So what we have a data team that tracks all the different industries in terms of collections and payments. So we get more real-time information where financials might come out later in the game. We have a lot more of that immediate response in the market of what's going on. So where about 70% of our portfolio has seen a drop in sales overall, there's 10% that have been either resilient or have even climbed in their sales. And a lot of that didn't really happen until about the last week in March. And some of that also is tied to, that's also when people started working from home. So they were adjusting for some of that. Going into April, there's still dips and everything. The ones that are going strong are selling to retail, such as Lowe's and other essential businesses. Overall, though, consumer retail goods, they're struggling big time, and spend data shows that the essentials are up and non-essentials are down, and they're likely to stay down. The health, beauty, appliances, consumers, some building materials are at risk. Automotive, those are going to be hit harder and have a longer recovery time. And you're going to see in the construction, I said building materials kind of, because residential construction, as new homes might not be built because families are recovering financially. You're going to see that market slow down some. Commercial is likely to slow down as well, depending on if it was more from a office space building perspective. But I think where you will see commercial still going strong is more infrastructure build out, whether it's hospitals, extending plants for different manufacturing. So it's interesting to see from what that perspective looks like on our slowdowns and the industries and where it's actually being affected more. The ones that are still going strong, pharmaceuticals, spirits, firearms, we like our guns apparently, and anything more related to our more essential goods. And right now you're seeing the PPP, SBA tax policy helping, so it still is fairly good in terms of payment history, but I think where you're going to start seeing the cash flow effect is more 30, 45, 60 days from now. So we're watching that very closely for our clients and our portfolios, to where the payments are going to start slowing down or not coming through at all.
Thank you, Brittany. Question.
So there's questions from the audience.
Did we lose you, Christian?
Oh, we'll try this again. This question is actually for Joe. Joe, what conversations should companies be having with their key clients, their suppliers, third-party advisors, as we emerge from this crisis?
Yeah, again, real important that you're communicating with them. I think one of the big things you want to do is, one, get in front of them and discuss what they're looking at and what does the next 6 months look for like them. You know, we know that we're coming out of this in some fashion, depending on where they're located. What are they looking? I would add one other component to this. I would also check your prospect list. You know, what are your prospects looking to do over the next 6 months? You want to get a good feel for clients that potentially were coming in, prospects that were coming in, but also clients that you currently have. You need to assess what's their 6-month plan, how much will they be purchasing over that time. Also, it's really, really important that you ask them, what are their current pain points? What are they dealing with? And yes, you might not be able to solve it with what you're providing for them, but on the other side, you may be able to be a valuable resource in order to get solutions. Like you're participating in this meeting, you may come up with things that you've heard. The Manufacturer Association is a great vehicle for information on the latest information that's going on. Real important that you stay relevant with your client by not just getting the information you need to determine what your strategy plan is, but also by being a resource to provide them information to solve pain points that they're currently dealing with. Because obviously, if you're not top on the pecking order, the things in front of you have to be solved, or they're not going to get to you. So real important that you do that, and you make yourself relevant to those clients. But so those are the things you want to have in terms of conversations with them. But when you have your advisor group, probably one of the most important things to speak about to advisors, because they have that outside perspective. We're in the day-to-day. We're just trying to keep our head above water, and we're dealing with it. You want them to come in, look at the financials, look at your projections, see what they see is working, not working. Let them be your sounding boards and your eyes and ears from an outside perspective that's not pressured by the day-to-day to see what's going. So when you talk about advisors, who are important advisors? Your bankers are important, your accountants, your attorneys are important, your wealth managers are important. You may have some other outside advisors that are either in the industry or mentors that you're dealing. That team becomes very, very important to you today, that you need to be communicating and planning. And while you're in the day-to-day, they're helping you navigate from the advisors. And if you have unpaid advisors, maybe now's the time to be giving those advisors a little bit of money for helping you through this. Give them a little additional incentive for wanting to support and help you. But the ones that you've been paying, like your accountants and your attorneys, and even your business consultants like us, very, very important that we're out there and we're giving you advice. And right now, with this tough time, we're not charging you, but we're there to help you and help you navigate through this. So those are some of the key things I would say.
Joe, just to touch on that as well, I think one of the things that you can ask for your key clients and your suppliers, is, especially if you have some concentration issues, is asking for their financials and understanding what are some of their pain points that could affect your business as well. And when you get those financials, if you're not confident in how to read them and analyze them to make strong decisions, Joe's team is going to be phenomenal in helping with analyzing some of those and looking at the AR balance sheet, the P&Ls, and what might be a pain point that could affect your business as well.
Yeah, and Brittany, just to follow up, I would probably do my credit checks and redo my credit checks and redo my background checks and try to go to the sources that I originally extended them credit on first, to see if I see any chinks, any things in the armor. I'd be very careful how I broach that subject with them, but it is a very important point that you want to see their financial stability. But part of that is making sure that you're looking, are they starting to increase their DSOs to you? The days outstanding for average days outstanding, is that starting to expand? And if it is, that's obviously a good sign to have that collection. The other side is you're going to talk to multiple people within your client. There's the person you probably deal with that's on the, that has the purchasing side. There's the finance side. There's, the operation side of the business. So you're going to have different conversations with each of those people relative to that. And to the point too, is the conversation of the finance people is, hey, are you guys going to be good? You know, and communicating with them, because it's all negotiations. You might turn around and say, hey, look, I'll give you a point or two in discounts and product that we're shipping if you continue to pay your current terms. So everything's going to be a negotiation. Anything that gets you to the front of the line, because as opposed to really extending terms with people right now, you want to make sure you're either holding on or shortening them by some kind of incentive, because the phrase "cash is king" is truly king, especially in times like this.
Thank you, guys. I have a question here for Doug. Doug, what communication and what kind of questions should you be asking when talking with your current at-home employees, and then also with any of your laid-off employees?
What questions to ask?
Questions, what types, and what kind of communication should you be having with them?
The communications we would recommend are to let them know what the timeline is, because uncertainty is the biggest concern, and what the unknown is what's going to. Human nature is when we don't know what's coming next, we often worry, and so just setting the expectations on when you will have them come back to work, as well as if they are working from home, what those expectations are during their time at home. So those are two key items in regards to that communication. Did I miss the second part of that question?
Yep, you're good. And then also, this one may be one for you again, Doug. We hear about a coming deluge of lawsuits, and some of them have already begun. What's your advice as to how to best limit potential liability?
And so that lawsuits, are those coming from employees?
I imagine employees.
Okay. The recommendation there would be to make sure you document everything, and there are human resource consultants that if there's a specific situation with HR human resources, it is a minefield, and often the employees think they know more than the employer in regards to their rights. And I would always recommend that they get counsel from an HR consultant, or there are attorneys who could help guide with that, and that would be there's so many different scenarios there. It's just hard to answer that question straight away, other than saying get advice, because every situation can be just a little bit different.
Yeah, and I want to add something on that too, because that's a really tough situation, and as a business owner and operator, nobody wants to get sued. That's the last thing you want to do. One of the things too, when you're reaching out to HR or even to legal on advice, you want to, a lot of times they'll come back, you can't do this, you can't do that. You need to get them to tell you what mitigates my risk the most as a solution, because first and foremost, it's a business decision. At the end of the day, the most important thing for you is the survival of your business. And if that survival means that you have to let go 50% of your workforce, and you have to, close this and close that and do that, so that when you come out of it, you can bring those people back or have the potential for doing that, or you're doing things in your business to make sure you survive, that is the most important thing. Because sometimes you don't do things because of what could potentially happen, okay? And that's not the way to run your business. You mitigate risk as much as possible, but you have to run your business to survive, especially in this type of economy.
Thanks, Joe. And since we're on the topic of employees, Doug, what if an employee refuses to come back to work? Are they able to receive unemployment? What's the best way to handle that situation?
So as you are bringing employees back on that might currently be on employment, once you make that offer to them, if they choose not to come back to work, they actually are no longer eligible for unemployment. So there is I've heard rumors about that. Oh, they're going to be getting more with the additional monies that they won't want to come back to work. However, once an offer has been made to them, they actually no longer are eligible for unemployment. And so if you need that employee, make that offer, and just it's up to that employee to choose whether they want to come back to work, but they will take a financial loss on their unemployment if they choose not to come back.
I didn't know that.
Thanks, Doug. And then also, if somebody doesn't follow the safety protocols, such as wearing a mask or using hand sanitizer, what are the options there?
So as an employer, you do have the right to request that your employees wear safety equipment, the personal protection equipment. That's the new acronym we have to learn now, is the PPE. That is the acronym for that. So as an employer, you can require employees to wear that. If they choose not to, or say that they don't want to, that's a tricky one, because some may say, well, I have a health condition, therefore I'm not able to wear this equipment, and that gets more on plays on the disability side and the American Disability Act, and so be very, very cautious on that one, because in those situations you cannot force them, because they may have that pre-existing condition. And so that's where I'd recommend getting advice of an HR consultant or attorney if it's a sticky situation for you. And then you might have to make accommodations for that employee in a different fashion for them to be able to work, or in a different location in your building, whatever might work best for you in that scenario.
Thank you. We had a question come in. A lot of my friends who own companies have reduced their sales teams and have restricted their service teams. Is that the best move, and where do they go forward from there? Maybe Joe, that would be a question for you to answer.
Yeah, and listen, you need your sales teams, you need your service teams to be out there. And when I say out there, I know we're all restricted and we have stay at home, but listen, Zoom meetings, video conferencing meetings, all those things are very, very effective in communicating, and phone calls, because right now, you know, your clients are looking for answers. They are looking for help of how to navigate this. So your sales teams, now you should be, especially now that we're about to come out of it, and depending on what happened with the relevancy of your product, and I think Brittany was talking about this earlier, about potentially having to look at alternative production of product, and that could be based upon there's not much of a demand anymore, or it could be the fact that there's plenty of demand, but you can't get the materials to produce the product. So those are all considerations. But you should be beefing up. Your sales team should be ready to attack the market. Your support services team or your client services team should already be actively engaged with your clients. Your sales team should have been actively engaged with prospects and what their intentions are, and also planning. Your sales and service team should be planning what's the strategy and the methodology and the value prop going out of this. How am I going to engage my clients? How am I going to manage their relationships? How am I going to manage my prospect pipeline and so forth? Listen, just about every business took some type of hit, except those that favored well and the situation and products and services were needed. But for those that didn't, it is really, really important that you come out of the gate very, very strong on the sales and service side, and that you have a really, really good game plan on how you're going to attack the market.
Thank you, Joe.
Touching on that, hey.
That's all.
Oh, I was going to just add to something that Joe said there from the sales team perspective. I think a lot of times too, if you're in a cash crunch, sometimes people might rather take a lower base salary with the potential of having a higher bonus.
There's
So
no,
maybe evaluating too with them, what are the options, especially if you're trying to do a strategic repush to enter into a new market, and how can they help with the overall diversification of your business. So that might be something on top of that to consider if you really are in a financial position that you would be considering to cut them. And you also might consider keeping your top half and giving them more upside opportunity, and being so not really necessarily reducing everybody, just the ones who have consistently underperformed even before the market. Sorry, just hopping in there to add.
Thank you, Brittany. And while we're on that subject of looking into what works best for your company, how would a company approach their bank or financial partner if they realize what was working for them before pre-crisis is no longer working? What's the best strategy in approaching those situations?
Yeah, I would say that you definitely want to have a conversation. Joe mentioned it earlier. Doug's mentioned it. Communication is the key, whether it's to your employees or your key partners, your financial institutions. You've got to let them know where you've evaluated hiccups in your business, and what your future sales are going to look like. Maybe redoing a cash flow projection based on how this is impacting your business, and then let them know what your game plan is going forward. So if you can come confidently to say, here's my risk, here's how I'm mitigating the risk, it's going to give them a lot more confidence to keep your line of credit open before they start closing something, or maybe even helping you expand into new lines. So come with a game plan. Let them know that you've thought through this, whether you've gotten the financials from your suppliers, your clients. What does that look like? Because the unknown for them, when you can give them a glimpse into the details of your overall structure, that's going to help a lot. So you might have something to add to that as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, the big plan there is exactly what you said. Do not go in without a plan. Do not go in without having good numbers and understanding where you're at. And, the plan doesn't have to be perfect, but, right now your bankers and your lenders are stretched. I mean, they're getting hit from every angle possible. What they would like to know is that, the people that they're lending to, the lendees, actually have good reporting, have good information, and actually have a plan that they can say, you know what, that sounds great, keep going. Because yes, it's important to continue to communicate with your lenders and what's going on, and tell them this is what we're going to do. It's probably easier for them to get things approved in this kind of climate. I mean, there's definitely going to have to be, relief on, covenant issues, things like that, because based upon the situation, most people are going to be out of covenant with their lenders. But if you give a good plan, they're going to say, okay, I'm going to give you 3 months or 6 months. We'll give you through the end of the year to let this come back to you before they try to take action. They're going to go, have to take action against people that don't have a good pulse on their business, don't have a plan, and don't have good reporting to support that plan.
Thank you. And we actually have a similar question that just came in. How would you also deal with landlords and lenders if they can't fully meet the lease or loan obligations?
So again, from my perspective as the business owner and dealing with that, is talk to them, explain the situation, try to get whatever deferrals they're going to be hurting on their end, but try to come through a negotiation and a agreement to where you need to be. I mean, listen, it takes time for, make sure you understand your legal rights in your leases, understand what non-payment, what default provisions are in your leases, but make sure you understand all of that. But the most important thing is communicate. Everyone has to be reasonable. Everyone has to give a little bit in a time like this. And I think the part where we really do ourselves a disservice if we're not out in front of it. And, you know, one of the things we talked about earlier is, you know, talk to your vendors, talk to your suppliers, talk to, you know, the people you're supplying. Make sure you're having those conversations with people, and based upon that, you're probably going to get some favorable concession that allows you to work. And you'll have to do that with a lot of them. So, you know, if you can't get all of your concessions from a landlord, look at your other vendors and suppliers and see where you could get some from there. You know, maybe it's your bankers or your lenders, and you get a little bit of forgiveness on your lease payments or some of your monthly, you know, principal and interest that could be tacked on to the back of your loan. You know, you got to get creative. You might not get it all from one place, but really what it comes down to is, what is the cash that's coming in? How much do I have to go out? And how do I dice it up among the people, my primary suppliers, and people I have to deal with, including my landlord, to be able to keep my business and operations open? Because the last thing they want to do is deal with a foreclosure on your business and then try to go collect money or even lease it in this kind of environment. The best for them is to go ahead and get even partial payments on it. So everything's a negotiation, but you need to know what position you're in, what are those default provisions, so you're well informed, and you need to know how much you actually need from them or where you could get it from other areas that potentially can cover that shortfall.
Thank you, Joe. Looks like we're entering the final few minutes of this webinar. So I want to ask all of our panelists, what is some good advice and guidance for a company that has experienced significant change and uncertainty? What would be your biggest piece of advice or your most thing for them to remember? What would be your takeaway? And we'll start with you, Doug.
I think the important things are to be intentional with your planning, and as Joe alluded to earlier, the most important item is to make sure that the core business stays around for the next opportunity when business comes back. And those are going to be tough decisions that business owners are going to have to make. But it's important to again, be thoughtful, intentional in that process, and document things. The question earlier about lawsuits is if you can document it so later there is a lawsuit, you have the information as to why and when you made certain actions, took certain actions. That would be my recommendation.
Thank you, Doug. Brittany, what would be your key takeaway?
Yeah, I would say what I've mentioned multiple times is don't let the supply chain control your business. Get in there, dig deep. Now's the time to evaluate and adjust and put yourself in your best cash position so that you can control your AR, AP, inventory, and your sales now. And then two, I would also say we have such a phenomenal community of resources. Don't isolate yourself. I know as a daughter of two business owners, I've had my own business and I try to think like a business owner. It's hard sometimes to look at yourself in the mirror, so ask for outside influence, whether it's key people that you trust within your organization or outside of it, so that you aren't missing that piece of the puzzle because you're kind of blind to it because you're so invested and emotional in what is your lifeblood for your family and everything that you've invested into. So utilize the community because we live in a phenomenal community. Orlando, Florida, it's a great resource and a great network of people. So, Joe?
Thank you, Brittany. And finally, Joe, your final thoughts, your key takeaways?
Yeah, the big thing, the most important thing is you can't make any type of plan or shift or dealing with it without having good operational and financial information. It is so important that you have that. So if you're not getting it now, you need to make sure you get it. Specific things like you got to have a good cash dashboard to understand where you sit. You need to have a report on your sales, your GP, your headcount trends with your staff. Look at how that looks like year over year, quarter to quarter, month to month. Look at your trends to understand what's is happening. You know, your AP and your AR. Make sure you see the trends in your you know, average days for collection or average days for payment. Look at your retention report. Understand why people are leaving you. What's the issues? Why are they doing it? What are they looking for? Look at your pipeline report, and if that's shifting and they're not looking for what you think you're able to provide, you know, look at your inventory reports. Look at you know, where you're sitting in terms of your cycle, your inventory cycle, and your cycle times. That's information. And then the last thing is, you know, from that information, you'll be able to determine the relevancy of your product, but also where the shift in where are your prospects and where are your clients looking to see if you have to make a shift in your product or service offering. But having good financial and operational information will allow you to make the best decisions on how to shift your business and what it's going to take to shift that business, both financially and operationally.
Thank you, Joe. We would like to thank the panelists for their time and knowledge this morning, and thank Fringe Benefit Plans, LSQ, and RVR Consulting Group as members of MACF and their support for manufacturers. We'd also like to thank once again Florida Makes for their continued support of Florida manufacturers. And we would like to thank you for your participation in today's webinar. I think it's important for the attendees to know that MACF is your Central Florida Manufacturing Association, and we have a lot of experts, not only in their field, like these three panelists this morning, but also they understand manufacturing. So on our website, www.macf.biz, we have all of our members listed, and we are happy to connect you to other manufacturers. As you exit the webinar, we are seeking your feedback on how to improve these webinars and better meet your needs. So the topics of value. So please watch for upcoming webinars through MACF and Florida Makes. I bid you a good day. Stay well. Thank you.